One. Aloha ahi ahi kako, and mahalo everyone for joining us tonight for this interview called In the Heart of the Candidate, an interview where candidates can express their intentions for their community, the position they pursue, and why they are the best candidate to support in the 2020 elections. My name is Leslie McCaig.
And my name is Chris Lum Lee.
And we will be your host for tonight.
Joining us tonight is candidate for Honolulu prosecuting attorney Meagan Kau.
Due to the SARS-CoV-2 madness, rather than presenting you with a physical lei, we're going to greet you with this beautiful virtual lei. Mahalo. Thank you for joining us tonight. So this is a Maila-inspired tea leaf lei with orchids, just for you.
Thank you. It's very pretty.
You're welcome. Thank you again for joining us tonight. So tell us about yourself and your background and focal points in your career that led you to this point for running for Honolulu prosecutor.
Actually, I never would have thought that I would be running for any political position. I was actually very fed up with politicians and fed up with people making promises that they can't keep. And I kind of just stopped following and stopped believing politicians. And I love my private life. On Facebook and Instagram, I never ever posted where I was or who I was with, and even my birth date. I never wanted to post that kind of stuff.
You're very careful.
And I never would have thought I would be running for a political office. But in 2015, several lawyers were looking for someone to run against Keith Kaneshiro because the legal community already knew that he was doing things he shouldn't have been doing. And so this very well-respected group of lawyers who were very experienced and very well known, they got together, formed this informal committee, and they chose me. They approached me and asked me to run for prosecutor. And well, first of all, I was shocked because I didn't know anybody knew who I was. But secondly, I was honored. And because I was honored, I felt like I had to be honest with them and tell them about my background before they endorsed me. So I had to tell them a couple of things, and most importantly were two things. The first thing was that at 15 years old, I lived on the streets. And so because I lived on the streets, I worked in a lot of bars. That's how I paid to live, and that's how I paid for undergraduate and eventually law school. The second thing I had to disclose to them was that I was a domestic violence victim. And there was a record of this because I had been subpoenaed to testify against my boyfriend at the time. And although I'm a very strong person and educated, I stayed in a violent relationship for 5 years. So this group of lawyers and I, we talked about it. We discussed it and we debated. But eventually they said, no, we can't endorse you as the candidate. And so they did not endorse anybody in the 2016 election against Keith Kaneshiro. Despite my history, Peter Carlisle, who has always wanted me to run for prosecutor, came back to me last year and he said, it doesn't matter, just run anyways. And so he and we sat down and we talked about it and we discussed it and we debated. And eventually I said, okay. And I put aside my personal interest and I made the big personal sacrifice and financial sacrifice, and I decided to run.
Oh, that's, I'm so, just hearing about your background, you are a very strong woman, coming from a background that's, that's kind of, you have a really rich story. And I'm glad you took that step to run. And wow, that's just.
Thank you.
That's why we have these interviews, so we can get to know the candidate. And thank you again for joining us tonight. Wow, Chris.
It's been a very good experience. I mean, I'll tell you, I don't regret it for a second. No matter what happens in this race, it has been an amazing experience. I've got to meet with and talk with amazing people from Honolulu that I would not have known but for this race. And so for that, I'm extremely grateful.
That's just amazing. And you're so humble too. You know, thank you, Chris, for hooking this up. You know, this is a really great opportunity, not just for it's for our viewers. You know, it's good that they know this. A lot of our viewers don't know this, especially you know, when it comes to the Honolulu prosecutors. You know, you don't see much content out there about the individuals themselves, and your story is just wow. It starts out really amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, there aren't a lot of people that are interested in this race, and historically, out of about 750,000 to 800,000 people that can vote, only 130,000 vote in this election. And historically, people don't pay attention to it. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it, but I think this year people are beginning to pay attention to this race more.
Yes, definitely, for sure. And especially in this division right here, because you represent the state of Hawaii, you represent city and county. It's very important that they know who's representing us. And it's really great that they get to see a closer insight of, you know, you as an individual as well. So thanks again, Chris. Wow, this is just really, really, it's starting off as a great interview already. So Chris has a few questions that we'd like to ask. And Chris can take it away.
Yeah, I have a few bunches of questions. So,
sorry.
You know, the prosecuting attorney really is the head of the agency. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there's more to being the prosecuting attorney than being a litigator. There's also an administrative component, and you have to know multiple sides of the fence of things, right? You have to know the financial management side, the personnel management side of things. So, you know, you have kind of a varied career yourself, right? You were a deputy prosecuting attorney for some time, then you went to private practice on the defense side. But something else that kind of caught my attention, just kind of reading up on your background, was can you tell us a little bit about your CPA? How did you kind of go in that route from, I guess, from CPA arena to law?
Yeah, so I am certified as a public accountant, but I'm non-practicing. And it's actually a funny story. When I was growing up, I guess people would say, you're going to be a lawyer. And I would say, no, I'm not. I'm deathly afraid of public speaking, and I'm deathly afraid of people. And so I grew up thinking I would never be something like a lawyer. I wanted to be an accountant, and I wanted to sit behind a desk and fill out paperwork and never have to speak in public. So for my undergrad, I went into accounting, and before I graduated, I took the CPA exam and I passed all 4 parts. And while I was working for a CPA, he told me, you know, you don't have to be a litigator, meaning you don't have to do trials. You can be a transactional attorney. I said, oh, what's that? And he said, you can draft contracts and sit behind a desk, and you don't have to talk to people or do public speaking. And I said, oh, that's exactly what I want to do. So I went to law school, and I went to law school thinking that I was going to be a transactional attorney, sit behind a desk and draft contracts and never have to speak in public ever. And so I came back to Hawaii after law school, and I worked for KPMG for 2 years in the tax division. And then I started applying to all of the big law firms to do business law, but nobody would hire me. And one day, one of the managing partners took me to lunch, and he says, you want to know why no one's hiring you? And I said, yes, I do, because I have pretty good credentials. He said, because you're a trial attorney. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm deathly afraid of public speaking, and I'm deathly afraid of people. And he said, well, why don't you try to go to the prosecutor's office, learn how to put a case together, and learn how to litigate and do trials. So I said, okay, I'll try. And I went, and Peter Carlisle hired me on the spot, and I rose through the prosecutor's office very quickly, and I became a trial attorney.
Nice journey. Wow. I think, you know, in all honesty, just hearing your background from CPA to law, that sounds like a pretty strong candidate. Well, don't you think, Chris? Like, honestly, like, you sound like she sounds like a pretty strong candidate.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's something that definitely separates from a lot of from the other candidates is because of that administrative managerial aptitude. I was kind of wondering, and kind of given that you came in under the Peter Carlisle administration, do you credit him, I guess, for being a mentor to you, or do you think that there were other people in that department at that time who kind of helped bring you up and make you the candidate and the person you are today?
I will say under Peter Carlisle, we had excellent supervisors. They were all mentors to me. Because I don't have parents, I never had strong parental guidance, but I did always look to people in my life to act as mentors for me. And as soon as we went into the district court, we had an extremely good supervisor who, taught us the right way to practice, and I credit her for that. And she's very supportive of me running for prosecutor. And then as we moved through the prosecutor's office up to each level, we had excellent supervisors that weren't just good lawyers, they were good people. They knew to teach us what integrity was, and they knew to teach us how to be a good prosecutor, because you can be a bad prosecutor. You can cheat, you can hide evidence, but that was not the prosecutor's office under Peter Carlisle. And Peter has been a great mentor to me because he's extremely fair and extremely objective. And so, yes, I credit the prosecutor's office for making me the trial attorney that I am today.
So when you were there, I guess, what types of cases were you trying? Because I think the other thing it's important for viewers to realize that it's not just every prosecutor tries the whole array of offenses and various types of cases. There are, and I, for my part, I don't know the different divisions because I didn't work with that agency when I was at the team, but can you give kind of like an idea of where the different prosecutors and different types of cases they try at?
Under Peter Carlisle, the office was set up like a well-oiled machine, and each person had to move through the ranks for a reason. And you go up through certain cases, through certain divisions, because it's a learning curve. And so you start in the district court where there are traffic cases, speeding tickets, running the stop sign, excessive speeding. And you start there because it really is low risk if you go to trial and lose. I mean, if you go to trial and lose a speeding ticket, it's no one's been hurt. It's a victimless crime. And it's not really that detrimental on our society if someone loses a speeding ticket. Then you move up to DUIs, all through traffic court. And then you go through the domestic violence misdemeanor division. Then you go to the misdemeanor jury demands, which is like assault 3. Any misdemeanors are punishable by up to a maximum of 1 year in jail. So you move up through the ranks during jury trials for those types of cases. Once you're done with that, then you typically go to a trials division, which is all felony cases. And felonies are punishable by up to 5 years in prison, 10 years in prison, or 20 years in prison. And then the next level up is the career criminal division. And that's where you handle, the roughest of the rough, the baddest of the bad, the guys that have prior convictions and are looking at mandatory minimum terms of imprisonment. So they cannot get probation. So I actually moved up directly to the career criminal division. I kind of skipped some steps. And so the cases I was handling were all very, guys that had been through the system, guys that were very violent, guys that were, burglarizing, robbing people, sex assault and murder cases. So the most significant case, well, I mean, all of the cases are very significant, but the most difficult case I had was State versus Joseph Vaimili. And I was the first deputy prosecutor in the whole state of Hawaii to ever try a promoting prostitution in the first degree. Lori Whalen was the victim, and she was a 24-year-old girl that had moved from the mainland to Honolulu, and she got hooked up with this guy, Joseph Vaimili. He was a pimp, and he pimped her out in Waikiki, and he pimped her out in the massage parlors. And he was terrible. I mean, this guy was violent and controlling and everything bad that you can find. He literally dragged Lori down a crowded alley in Waikiki and beat her in front of a number of people, and nobody did anything about it. And on hundreds of occasions, he threw her naked and wet into a shower and took a leather belt and whipped her on her back so that she had marks on her back when we finally found her. Then he took her by gunpoint and held a gun in her mouth and drove her to North Shore and threatened to kill her. But as all domestic violence relationships go, when we arrested him, she didn't want to testify against him. And at some point in time, it was because she was madly in love with him. And at other points in times, it was because she was deathly afraid of him. And so I had to form this rapport with her on the phone because she had moved back to the mainland. And I had to talk with her and I had to explain to her how the justice system worked. And I had to, convince her to come back to Honolulu to testify against him. And it took 2 years for us to get her to come back. But eventually she did. And we went to trial and we convicted Joseph Vaimili. And he currently sits in prison today because of that conviction.
Do you think your background with domestic violence helped you build that rapport with this female so that she could move forward, move forward with the case? So
definitely. I mean, it's very difficult for deputy prosecutors to deal with domestic violence victims when you don't really understand what they've gone through. They think, oh, you just live your life, you get a subpoena, and then you show up to testify. But it's so much more than that. When I finally left my relationship, I had to, on a whim, throw all of my belongings into a truck. I went to my mother at the time who has some issues, and she said, no, you can't stay here. You chose to be with him. So I lived in my truck. I was homeless again for the second time in my life, and I lived in my truck for months. And by the time I could find a place to live, I was basically couch surfing, and I moved, I think, 14 times in a span of 1 year. And then I got subpoenaed. So I had to go through all of that before I got subpoenaed. And when you get the subpoena, you're just exhausted. So I understood this about Lori, and all I could do was explain to her, talk with her, empathize with her and explain that she was going to be okay. So it definitely helped me get her to come testify.
That's I think a lot of
talking about.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
Oh no.
No, go ahead.
This is like completely 100% organic here. I think a lot of I'm not sure if a lot of candidates have the background that you have. The background that you have makes you a very strong person and a very strong candidate. That's from your life experience to your education background, as well as your CPA background, because a lot of the community members don't understand that there's more to, it's not just superficial where I put my face out there and I'm making all these big shot calls. There's a lot of dynamics that go behind the scene, finances, management, and if you don't have a strong background in that arena, then it doesn't make a strong office.
Yeah, there are actually 300 people in that office.
That's a lot of people. And you want the best to manage an office that big. And you want the best to mentor people as well. Because, some people have compassion, some people don't. And I can hear it in your stories. And I respect that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for running.
So, when you know, these types of situations where you interact with domestic violence victims or victims of any crime where they're step forward and speak out against the person who victim, it's a certain skill to kind of build that rapport and
Oh, we lost Chris for a little bit. Oh no. Okay, let's see. See, and that's the thing about you know, the online interviews. Sometimes the signal gets dropped, and we just lost that really great question that Chris was about to ask.
I think it was a sign of sure, but so I guess, you know, I'm sorry, back, did I freeze again? Freeze again. It's not. Sorry. So anyway, the question I was going to ask was, you know, it takes a degree of skill, right, to be able to communicate with people. I think when you look at your hires and things like that, you want people who's going to communicate well amongst themselves. But this is a special type of situation where you have people who need to communicate with victims and on a higher level, even form community partnerships and that type of thing. It's not easy to send someone to a 3-hour class and say, you know, this is how you communicate and all this type of stuff. So do you have a way or a preference, I guess, as far as the personalities of people you're going to be staffing your agency with? I assume that, you know, there'd be a little bit of house cleaning, because people don't realize, I'm sorry to digress a bit, but most people in the prosecutor's servants, that a lot of them are contract hires.
Sorry, Chris, you're cutting in and out.
There is a chat that you
Barely.
can use. There's a chat function. So at the bottom of your screen, there is a chat function, and if you like, you can type it into the chat function, and we can read it. Because Chris, it was a little broken.
But I got the gist of the question. I guess basically the question is, how are we going to train people to better deal with and better guide victims through the process? I think that's what the question was. And I mean, you're right. You can't.
Yes.
Okay. You can't just send someone to a class and be like, here, this is how you do it. I want to sit down with the deputies. I want them to see me sit down with victims. I want to have my own cases, and I want them to see. I want to lead by example and show them, you know. And I mean, obviously, everyone comes through life with their own background and their own experience. And so, yeah, if you've never been a domestic violence victim or you've never lived on the streets, you don't have that perspective. But I train a lot of students, and I've got great employees, and I've taught them how to communicate with clients and how to guide people through the justice system. So I would do the same thing with the deputies and bring in supervisors that are not only strong, but compassionate.
I think that's a great idea.
So
that's what we need a lot of.
So I think the other thing, when you're looking at staffing your deck, and you know, in that particular position, because a lot of the deputies are appointed, you have kind of latitude as far as the tone of which you're going to staff your leadership with. With you as prosecutor, I guess, what are the core values, so to speak, that you want your administration to really reflect that set that tone?
Yeah, that's the exact tone I want. I want the deputy. Well, first of all, I want it to be a great place to work. Right now, the morale in that office is very low. And that is a direct result of the federal investigation against the top prosecutor. I don't want it to be like that. You know, I want the office to be a great office where everybody comes to work and they're happy to be there. They feel fulfillment in the job that they do, and they want to fight for victims. And I believe that I can set that tone. That's how it was under Peter Carlisle. And everything comes from the top. In every corporation, everything comes from the top. And so if we set this tone from the beginning, through me and the supervisors, I think the deputies will be extremely happy doing what they do. It is an extremely fulfilling job to be able to help someone that can't necessarily help themselves.
And the fact that you've already, you have that dynamic and you know how the office works, I think that's also an upper hand for you as well.
Yeah, it's very surprising that there are some people running that have never been in that office before. It's a very different thing to be a deputy prosecutor. It's a very different experience from being a public defender, whose job is to represent the defendant and protect the defendant's constitutional rights. It's very different than being a private defense attorney. So, with all the respect that is due to everybody that's running, if you've never been a deputy prosecutor before, I think it's very difficult to say that you would be a good candidate for this position.
Definitely be a challenge, right? Not to know the inside dynamic of an office that holds a very prestigious title and a heavy responsibility as well.
Yes, very.
So I think, kind of moving up more to the macro level now, as far as the administration goes, undoubtedly you're going to have a lot of additional agencies you're going to have to work with. You're going to have to work with the city council on local legislative issues. You're going to have to work with the state legislature, to the state executive council. You have services. You're going to be approving budgets. The prosecutor is not reporting the mayor. There's certain interaction between those two entities and the administration reports. I guess, do you have any reservations or concern about the interaction taking place? You get to the executive branch side and see it's very politicized, and on the prosecution side, it's as political. So, is there anything that does concern you about that, or that you envision becoming any type of an issue down the line?
So I hear the question to be whether I have any reservations or concerns about having to deal with different branches of the government as a prosecutor. And my answer to the question is no. I am a younger female in a male-dominated profession, and I have had to stand up for myself, stand up for other people, and deal with a lot of political, things. And that doesn't bother me. I have no fear. I can talk to anybody. I realize I'm kind of the political outsider. I'm not a politician, but I also have much respect for other people. I don't just bulldoze my way into things. I read situations. I read people. And so I would approach it just like I do with my clients, with my cases, and with opposing counsel. So I have no reservations about that at all.
I'm very glad I voted for you.
Thank you.
I'm very glad I voted for you. And you know what? I am so glad that we had this interview as well, so we can show everyone else this side of Meagan Kau, and hopefully by the 8th of August, it'll be Honolulu Prosecutor Meagan Kau. So,
I don't know. I was going to say, sorry to cut you off. I was going to say, hopefully I don't cut off, before I show this, but I got this really awesome bumper sticker. I don't know if anyone, you guys can
show me that earlier.
Really see that, but.
Yes, we made a bunch of bumper stickers that say, "I'm a cowgirl. I support Meagan Kau for prosecutor."
Nice.
And I'm a cowboy, and I support Meagan Kau for prosecutor. Yes, it was like, I'll tell you, I was teased when I was young, and people would moo at me and yell "Ho mau cow cow," and I've been mooed at more times in my life than you can ever imagine. And so we decided to turn it into a positive thing, and we thought of this cowgirl cowboy idea.
Catchy, I love it. I like it. I want one. I'll put that on my computer. I'll rock that, definitely. So
thank you. We got plenty.
Oh, cool. And I can pass them out too. We are coming to the ending of this interview, but we like to give you such a huge mahalo for coming. And I gotta give one huge mahalo to Chris too, because if it were not for Chris, we wouldn't have had an interview or a forum. So big mahalo to you, Chris. Mwah. Big mahalo to you, Meagan. Mwah. And I hope you win. We wish you all the best.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. So with that, we're going to conclude with He Mana'olana'au, He Pomai Ka'ikakako, Mahalo Nui Loa, and vote for Meagan Kau. She gave you many reasons why you should.